Ladies and gentlemen, what's going on? This is Pre Shakeups once again with the Worthy Cause podcast on the Arena Network. I have a guest here that I haven't seen in a while, and I'm kind of pandering, wearing my San Francisco hat and jersey. The reason I'm wearing all of this San Francisco fly stuff is that we have an historian of hip hop culture and the connective tissue of hip hop and politics and social awareness for over 30 years. You might have seen his work in Netflix documentaries or anything people are talking to about the culture of hip hop, especially West Coast hip hop. He knows his stuff. Among other things, you can also check out his latest book with Jeff Chang, Can't Stop, Won't Stop, a hip hop history book. The young adult edition is the most recent one that came out. Find it at all your bookstores. We have the legend, Davey D, Mr. Davey D in the building. What's going on, man?
Good. And, you should have wore a Yankee outfit because I'm a Yankee fan. I'm not I love Willie Mays, but I'm not a San Francisco Giant fan. And just so people know, in the Bay Area where I live, there's the East Bay where the A's play for now, where the Raiders were, and where the Golden State Warriors were. So we have those would be the teams for where we're at. And then San Francisco's on the other side, and they had the 49ers and the Giants. Now they got the Warriors.
So I'm pandering the wrong way right now. That's basically what you're telling me. I failed at my pandering.
No, the outfit looks good. You look good. You look better than the players that they have there.
Listen, I think this is perfect because I'm working for this network, but based out of South Carolina, and I'm potting for them, and they're leaving it up to me for the most part. Outside of us, at times we're going to be hyper local of South Carolina stuff, but I think there's a few things that I thought you would be a professional on, even on a national level, because I think that South Carolina specifically hit a national conversation with politics since South Carolina is about to be the primary state for the Dems. But aside from all that, what I really want to talk to you about, because I know you're an expert on, what the hell do you think about this Drake and Kendrick situation that's going on right now? I would love to hear your feedback on it.
Well, there's several aspects to it. One, I like the fact that both artists came to the table and gave us things that we had to look up, especially Kendrick. Let me rewind this, et cetera. And then it kind of dissolved into something that is no longer about your position in the music industry, into stuff that's a little bit more personal. And every time I've seen that happen, it results in violence. I remember the Hyro Hobo battle. I was there when it happened. Started off on some MC stuff. And then the next thing you know, folks stopped rapping and it was like, well, your mama was this and your daddy was that. And, later that night, somebody pulled out a gat and started shooting, right? Game and 50, same thing, and I think while I love the battle and I love some of the questions it can raise, I still think that we always have to remind people and send a signal that this is just a battle. It'd be like if me and you get into a heated debate about sports teams, and I might say, man, you and your funny hat, you might go, you and your funny shirt. Nobody should take that as me and you are going to go knuckle up if we see each other, but it's just two guys in a barbershop having a heated discussion or a passionate discussion about something that is very subjective. There are Drake fans, even though some of these people said that Drake has lost. I can tell you as a DJ, who did two parties this weekend that were packed, more than 500 people in each event. Drake didn't lose because people were dancing to his music. I played, about 4 or 5 Drake songs. And maybe one Kendrick song, right? Nobody came up to me and asked me to play any of the diss songs, and we're not talking about young people there. Some of the older people didn't understand where Kendrick was coming from. And, and then I go to another spot and people are just all about Kendrick. So
Yeah.
if I had to talk about it, you really have a divide among pop, mainstream, commercialized hip hop, and then Kendrick would be arguably a little bit more underground. You
Hmm.
had a thing about, to a certain degree, about substance. What are you talking about? And that can call into question. But we got this thing going on in the Middle East, and none of them talked about that. And I think both of them should have addressed that. Macklemore for the win.
Which is hilarious that he's the only one that said something.
and, and he called them both out for
Yeah.
not speaking on those larger issues.
Well, you know what? I think you touch on the next thing I kind of wanted to touch on is that, you know, for the most part, what this platform is that, it's covering a lot of like um things that are focusing on politics, South Carolina politics. But more specifically, what I want to do with the pod is, like I said, the intros, the connective tissue, right? Is that, hip hop, I personally feel like hip hop has a responsibility to figure out ways to be politically involved, politically active, using your voice. But also, there's certain artists that when they're not doing that, I don't get angry because I'm kind of like, well, shit. We get mad at Khaled, who's Palestinian, for not saying anything. But do I really want to hear Khaled say anything? Who's never said anything of substance? So what I end up developing is this appreciation instead of getting angry at the people that's not speaking on these things to support the people that are. Now, you came up in the era of the public enemies of the world. And I would even say NWH in a certain regard, their music was kind of a political way of saying, hey, here's what's going on the West Coast. Our involvement is being young black men dealing with the police, dealing with the system, ended up on the FBI's list. Do you think hip hop culture as a whole, the younger people, have lost that focus of using their voice to be community and politically and civically active? Or do you have any hopes in the future of the new generation to use that platform to speak out?
No, I don't think it's lost it at all. I think the recording industry highlights things that are non-political, and sadly, social media throttles a lot of the voices of things that are political. Look, I mean, I like the battle, but I didn't ask for it to be in my feed every 2 seconds. That's that's Mark Zuckerberg and whoever controls the social media platforms deciding that they're going to amplify that. I didn't see Macklemore's thing get amplified the same way, and nor do I see political discussions that I think are of importance being amplified the same way. They just had a big old hearing in D.C., right, that involves a lot of people right here in Berkeley and the East Bay. That's not amplified. It wasn't even mentioned, right, on the local news. But what
Mm-hmm.
was mentioned is the Drake and
Kendrick
and
Lee, yeah.
yeah. So why is the local news covering it? What relevance does it really have in the news thing? This is a discussion me and you can have, and people who are fans of the music. But when is media covered Battle of the Bands outside of a
Yeah.
sports contest? So what it says to me that folks are trying to keep us depoliticized, and yet around the country you have 250 encampments set up just to look at this situation in Gaza. So and arguably these don't necessarily have to be rappers. These are
Mm-hmm.
people who grew up in hip hop culture who look around and say, I'm going to make a way out of no way. And so I think the activism is still there. I think folks who came up in the era that I came in are still very relevant. Me and you come up in this, and we're still very politically astute and active and do what we need to do. Whether or not that's going to get talked about on the Breakfast Club, or whether or not that's going to show up, in a DJ Academics podcast or anything else that's amplified, is a whole other story. And that means for us, we have to build our own platforms, or we have to, make sure our connection with the community is deeper. So for me, I don't expect and don't want to even be on those platforms. I make sure that my platform is airtight, and I can confidently say, if you go out here where I'm at, people know my name and know my work, but they also know my name and they know the work of hundreds of other people that are knee deep into trying to change their community for the better. And that's not by accident, that's by design. We all kind of understand that we got to bring our A game to the political arena.
Mhm.
And part of the A game is making sure that we support the other folks. So it's not about Davey D. It's about me being a part of a whole community that, will kick up dust and is kicking up dust. And that's what we do day in and day out, whether you decide to talk about it on, the local TV or national TV or not. We ain't going nowhere. We got
I,
ditches to dig.
I think that one of the things that I thought was really interesting, I remember when the Last Dance documentary came out, and it was the whole Michael Jordan thing, and I remember when they brought up the subject when Jordan was asked to get involved politically, because I think there was a guy that was in the Senate in North Carolina who's a historically racist dude, and there was a black Democrat that was running against him, and Jordan was encouraged to say something out in support of the black guy that was running. I think Harvey B. Grant was running.
Yeah,
And
against Jesse Helms.
yeah, who when he won said something racist again. He said something that there would be no it's something that involved monkeys or something, or a zoo. Like it was something real racist when I was looking at the footage of it. But the famous Jordan line that came out of that was when he was asked to be politically involved. His response was, he said it was tongue in cheek, but he said, Republicans buy shoes too, and he got really beat up for that. And funny enough, with the recent passing of OJ, I look at it kind of in this really interesting thing where Jordan got beat up for being able to say, I'm staying out of the political sphere. I don't want to cause any stir one way or other. I just want to focus on sports. And I'm saying to myself, you look at someone like Jerry Seinfeld, who ironically was complaining about, the far left is keeping comedians from saying anything. Oh, well, Jerry made a whole fucking career of saying that he made a show about nothing. And he never said anything controversial, nothing controversial, nothing about people, nothing of any substance for years. But that's his right? But no one's coming at him to say, you need to be more political. You need to talk about what's going on in Israel. No one ever says that to him. And so part of me thinks that when I'm looking at Black people in the spotlight, whether they're athletes, whether they're artists, do we put an unnecessary pressure on them to be able to speak out? Because when I thought about it, I was like, if Jordan just want to play ball, let him play ball. And when we find the Kaepernicks of the world that want to do something and say something, let's support them, as opposed to me getting angry that certain people aren't saying something. So I always thought that if you had a scale, on the high end, there's like Ali. On the lowest of ends is OJ, and Jordan is somewhere in the middle, right? And I think that's fine. Do you think that there should be that extra responsibility of Black creatives to be able to say something? Do you find that moment when you're looking at people and wishing they would say more?
So there's a lot there that you said, and you used Ali as an example. And so I'm going to dovetail off there. Why was Ali able to say what he said? Why was Ali, up on the politics of Vietnam and able to make these statements? Well, Ali had a strong relationship with a body of people that politicized him. He was with the Nation of Islam. He had Malcolm X that was like lacing him up. And the history of athletes speaking truth to power or entertainers comes under the understanding that at a particular point in time, I mean, before, up until the time that we started to get the internet, the people with large microphones, you needed them to encapsulate everything that we as Black folks or a body of people needed to say. So if there was no West Coast representation, then we needed NWA and EV and Ice Cube and Too Short and E40 to represent the West Coast. If we put it in the hip hop arena, you had to represent the whole totality of things. And you had to bear that pressure. If you were black people, us as black folks didn't have access and didn't have a fair take on our narratives. So we needed whoever was famous to speak on our behalf, knowing that a reporter would go, well, here's Preach. He's educated. He's politically savvy. He knows his stuff. They're going to walk right by you and go to somebody 10 years younger than you who's the star football player in a high school game and go, what do you think of what's going on in the Middle East? What do you think of reparations? And that person who's 16 or 17, but more famous than you, has now got to answer everything. And so I set this up to say that Dr. King, along with Harry Belafonte, actually had a strategy. They were very intentional. They engaged these athletes and artists to make sure that they were politically sound. And, there's a book called Kingmaker that's written by young brother named, well, he's not young anymore, but he's older, Marcus Goodloe. He comes out of hip hop culture and all that. And what he does, he talks about how King and Belafonte went to everybody, make sure they had a talking point. So if you're famous, I'm going to come to you and preach, man. This is what the civil rights movement is about. Let me make sure you have it. But more importantly, they actually went and supported you. So before Dr. King would even come there, he's already watched your show. And so when he's talking to you, he's like, man, I watched 5 of your episodes and I've been following your work. And I actually came to your concert last week. So now it's not somebody who's like, you need to do this. He's already invested in what you're doing. And there's all kind of stories about Dr. King doing that, whether it's with Nichelle Nichols, who was on Star Trek, and she was talking about quitting, and Dr. King goes to see her, and he's like, look, my kids watch you every night, and we really need you in this position. You don't understand what you're doing for, youngsters. He came to see her. Aretha Franklin gets the key to the city. Dr. King is sitting in the audience, not on stage, but sitting in the audience, like, I support you. And so they had a council of elders. They fed information, and they were in constant conversation with those folks. So I'll conclude by saying, what is our relationship with the people that we want to have, speak out on our behalf? And if we don't have one, then you can't expect the Michael Jordan to just miraculously pick up on it, or, your local artist down the street to miraculously pick up on it. It's great if some people do, but oftentimes folks are dependent upon the relationships that are right in front of them. So if you're in an arena and they say, hey, brother, I'm going to bring you in, but I need you to kind of, not rock the boat, that may be your primary relationship. And here I am, like, talking about you need to say stuff. And then lastly, we don't necessarily need an athlete or an artist to say things anymore. It'd be nice if they do, but it's really coming under the auspices of the big microphone. I got a big following on Instagram and Facebook, so I don't necessarily need you to do that. But what a lot of artists have been doing is they've been like, look, I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to rock the boat, but let me bread you out. Let me make sure you need a bail fund. I got you. So I'm not going to put artists on name because they do want to remain anonymous, but a lot of them contribute. And I'll give you one example where that came out was after Katrina. David Banner, who was very outspoken, had a thing called Heal the Hood, and he was trying to get money, and he came off tour, and Universal was mad at him because he finally had a big hit record, but he was like, I'm not touring, I'm going to go help my people. And so there was all this stuff going on, and he didn't know how to do a nonprofit. He didn't know anything. And it was Nelly who came to him very quietly and was like, look, you can put this in my nonprofit's name. I already know how to do this. And it was young Jeezy who flipped him $250,000. And what happened was David Banner mentioned that on a radio show I did. And he said Jeezy was angry with him because he didn't want people to know that he gave him that money. It's like, I didn't give you that money like that. Just, take this money and do what you need to do. But the point is that those artists understood that their position didn't necessarily mean that they need to speak. Their position can be to finance. Their position can be to open doors. Their position can be, any number of things. And to your last point, maybe I don't want to hear Khaled speaking on, on the situation. But if Khaled can bread people out, then do
Yeah.
that quietly, hold your position, and let us fight that fight.
I think that's important too, because I think that there are people that want to help out with the movement or progressing the culture, whether it's hip hop culture, whether it's Black community, whether it's BIPOC community forward. But sometimes I don't know if certain people are equipped to have conversations with certain people, right? So like you was bringing up the Breakfast Club, and I was really disappointed that they had Candace Owens on there, and Joe Budden podcast had Candace Owens on there, and my bigger thing was, and I know that the idea is, hey, let's give people an opportunity to have these conversations and this and that. But I also felt like, and I'm gonna put myself in this position too, was that I don't know if the people that were interviewing Candace were equipped to talk with her and have that type of impact they were expecting. Like if Breakfast Club is going to have Candace Owens on, instead of having her sing the intro to the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, bring Angela Rye's ass on there that day, right? Have somebody there where either they're politically active and understand some of the nuances of some of the things that could have been thrown at, or someone that's a journalist or whatever. So somebody in that position is not using this Black platform to help with a PR situation, right? So sometimes I feel like, everyone wants to talk about conversations, but sometimes maybe there's a celebrity that's just like, look, I know that I wouldn't be the best person to speak about this, but here's how I could fund this. Here's how I could do something else quietly.
So a couple of things on that. First of all, they're looking for views and likes and clicks and all that, right? Like it or not, she's an audience, and they figured, let me bring her on and have at it, right? So it wasn't really about trying to bring political correctness. It was about, this is going to be serving us. Mm-hmm. The second thing is that I'm come from the school of, I don't validate somebody who's on some, if I can just use the word, fuck shit.
Absolutely.
Like, you're not coming on my show. I don't have anything to do with it. People have asked me to debate her and do all this stuff. I there's no reason to. Why would I want to, to get points? No, we got issues to discuss, not be a distraction, right? The last thing is that the week that she went on, or a couple of weeks prior to her going on the Breakfast Club, all of us, well, I know we did, we got a letter from her PR person, and the letter, I could pull it up, goes, Candace Owens has had the blackest week ever. And this is before she went on the Breakfast Club. So they were talking about things that she had done, right? And it was like, that's a real interesting way to word things. And then I realized, like, oh, she's trying to get into these Black circles. And it's like, if you want to interview with her, give us a call. No, I don't want to interview with her. Why would I want to do that? Because I remember this is the person that at every turn used their platform to demonize and to subjugate and to ridicule important movements, whether it was George Floyd, with her going on that, all the way down to, folks who were speaking out against atrocities that were born to her. She was the, the whisperer that they used. So, you can give it a time of day. I didn't watch the Breakfast Club interview. I didn't care about having her on my show. And I have nothing to say to a person like that, because I feel that they were deliberately trying to be harmful. And this is not, none of this stuff is for real for them. They're just trying to protect their own brand. This is a rebranding effort. And, go to Joe Rogan and rebrand yourself.
Right. And, and I think that there's there has to be a line drawn that when people are talking about it's important to have conversations, I feel like if I feel that person that I'm supposed to have a conversation with despises who I am, or has at every turn, I could have been George Floyd. You know what I mean? And for someone to say things like that about someone that looks like me and feel like me, there's really nothing to discuss, right? It's not necessarily a Democrat Republican thing. Like, I think theoretically, if if we look at a problem and have different ways of viewing a problem, then I can have that conversation. But if somebody's just like, yo, your existence is something that is a hindrance to me, I don't want you here at all, then there's really nowhere to start with that. And I think what I think is really interesting is I think that you joke with me anytime that being from South Carolina, usually when something in South Carolina pops up nationally, with the exception of Dawn Staley and our amazing Gamecock squad that went undefeated. Usually when something goes to the West Coast about South Carolina, it's usually nothing good. And you're always there to remind me. I'm interested in someone who's on the left coast. What has been your experience when South Carolina stuff pops in the news, whether it's Nikki Haley, whether it's Tim Scott? What's your take on what you're seeing from over there, from kind of like an outside looking in?
So usually when we hear South Carolina, we hear it for 4 reasons. We hear it for book banning and repressive laws. We hear it for the clown show that Nikki Haley was, the clown show that Tim Scott was, and the clown show that Lindsey Graham is, right? That's what we hear about it. My time in South Carolina was when they had the debates, and I was in Columbia and got pulled over twice, in South Carolina, as I came into down Highway 95 and as I was leaving, right? Both $300-$400 tickets, right? For some crazy stuff. And, Myrtle Beach was nice. I went over there and found cheap hotels.
Back in the day, you went to Bike Week back in the day.
Well, I'm looking for a place to stay, and the hotels were cheaper over there. But South Carolina is also, being a New Yorker, that's where people's families are from. When you look at the migration trail, South Carolina should hold a place that's dear in people's hearts because, people's families are from there. In the summertime, you went down to South Carolina. And then there's a whole history that's there that I don't think has really been talked about. And part of that history is continue with Sister Daly and her team. But most people don't even know they're from South Carolina, if you really think about it. If you go, what team, where are they from? It's like, because once you start mentioning South Carolina, then there's an opportunity to talk about another side of South Carolina, the history of South Carolina, that there was a resistance in South Carolina. There, the Angolan, folks were in South Carolina who were hard to pin down and to enslave. And there's all kind of things that we can talk about the history of South Carolina. This is the home of, one of the largest slave revolts in South Carolina. So there's a whole history there that is completely lost and overshadowed by the foolery that has been represented by those 4 aspects, 3 of them being people. Tim Scott, there's no racism in America. Lindsey, Nikki Haley, who's like, I'm a little brown girl who grew up. No, you just became a brown girl for that 1 second. And Lindsey Graham, the ass kisser, the Trump ass kisser is, it's not a good look on this great state and the people that, like yourself and others, who really make things happen, but it's not going to see the light of day nationally speaking.
Yeah, well, I know Tim Scott is still kind of fighting to be Trump's VP, and that's kind of scary as well. But I get to the point where here's what frustrates me the most about them specifically is not about just their policies prior to this, but one of the things that, because I was here, man, when Trump started to run in 2015, everybody denounced him. All these people, and this is what drives me crazy about the Republican Party completely, is that everybody in the Republican Party was just like, nah, this dude is not it. He's terrible. He's embarrassing, yada, yada, yada. This man called Ted Cruz's wife ugly. He said that Ted Cruz's dad helped assassinate Kennedy. Tim Scott was on the record of saying how If Trump was elected, it would ruin the country. Lindsey Graham said all this crazy stuff. And as soon as he gets elected, all of a sudden, they're just falling in line. And that's what really disappoints me, because I feel like the praise that they're giving him, y'all know y'all don't mean this shit. And the fact that it becomes party over the country or party over the state, I'm very disappointed in that. And I get to the point where I'm just like, you know, everyone can see through it. Everyone knows that you don't feel this way. Everyone knows. And I just don't know. I just don't know what to do with that. I think that one of the things that hit me recently that I thought was really funny, sad funny, not ha funny, was that I saw that about a week ago, Trump has been held in contempt like 10 times in court because he'll make these outbursts on social media. And the judge is basically like, yo, I'm charging you $1,000 every time you say some crazy shit. But it's not enough money to deter you. So the judge is like, if you keep this up, I can hold you in contempt and put you in jail. And so this article is basically talking about what the logistics would be if Trump goes to jail and what will you have to do with Secret Service. And it was just a normal, regular ass article on a Tuesday. And I'm like, these are the conversations that we're having. It's like, how would Secret Service handle their job to protect the president or ex-president while he's incarcerated? And I'm just really disappointed that a lot of this stuff feels very, very normalized. And I guess a better question would be,
well, see, let's stop right there.
Okay, what you got?
Who wrote the article? And why did they write that article? See, this is, you know, we just can't say the article, but we need to say that Jim Jones wrote this article. Why did Jim Jones write this article? Because once we kind of see that, then, you know, a couple of things. Maybe he worked for a publication that is, you know, cheerleading these types of things. Maybe Jim Jones feels like he can, you know, not the rapper Jim Jones, I'm just using that name, feels like he can, you know, get a leg up by being contrarian or controversial. But at the same time, that's somebody who we have a name for, and we can pin that on him or her and hold them accountable. Why would you be this irresponsible and write an article like that and let you, you know, ride that wave? So
you think it's irresponsible and not just this is just where we are, that those are real questions that need to be posed now?
I think if me and you doing this podcast may have people wanting to look you up or me up and want to, why you have this guy talk on the air and blah, blah, blah. They want to do deep dives into your background and all that other stuff. And I often remind people, like, you know, you dox me, I can dox you. You know, you're not the only one that has technological prowess and friends, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can come for me, I'll come for you. So I think what we ultimately want is change, and we ultimately want to see things move in another direction. Now, to be honest, I'm going to highlight things that are actually talking right more than I'm going to downgrade you. But if it's no big deal for me to tag you on a Twitter thing or X thing, whatever, why not? Say, why would you do that? I do that all the time with local reporters, you know, and, you know, I'm like, why would you give perfect example? Good Morning America did a 10-minute segment a couple of weeks ago on the encampments. They had a reporter in 4 different states. I'm in Columbia, I'm in MIT, I'm over here. And you know what they did this whole report on the encampments. You know what they didn't say during the whole time? They didn't say not once why people were actually doing the encampments. They never brought up the word divestment. They never brought up the word ceasefire. They did a whole story about people are encampments and what the police response may possibly be, right? So that became the basis of it. So to me, it was like, okay, Robin Roberts out of Mississippi, right? You're the head of that show. Why would you all do a show and not bring up why these students are actually there? Why would you frame it that way? You know, who's your reporters out there? So I sent it to all of them. And, you know, and would they change? I don't know. But at least the 40, 50,000 people on my feed who got a chance to see it may ask the same question. So next time somebody comes on and they're like, oh, you know, we're standing in front of an encampment, and they go, well, why is the encampment there?
Hmm.
maybe you need to be put on notice. I think we always, with media, it's a contact sport. It shouldn't be a spectator sport. It's a participatory thing. And we should ask
Hmm.
those questions and ask you as a host or me as a journalist, why did you, you know, why did you frame it that particular way? And,
Hmm.
and then you can stand on business, like I framed
Yeah.
it this way because, A, B, C,
Whether
and
you
D.
agree with it or not, you have clarity in the process, right? So
Absolutely.
so two questions. Number one, do you ever see yourself, unless you've already done it, see yourself running for any type of political office out there? Number two, how hopeful are you as far as the national elections look like this year? Do you have any hope? And I think that what happens with me specifically as a black columnist in South Carolina, anytime like there's really like detrimental things that's happening to BIPOC people in the community, it's like, oh, Preach will write a column and make us feel better. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I have any more feel good left in me. What is your take on what this year in the future is looking like on the national level? And do you
So,
feel that you're going to throw your hat in anything politically soon?
no, I've thrown my hat into the ring, but not as somebody who runs. I definitely have to help people achieve their goals and getting elected.
Mhm.
So that's what I do. Um, in terms of this election, elections have become a opportunity for folks who are running in their respective parties to pander to particular demographics.
Mhm.
And one of the things that has happened over the years is that there's been a pandering to a number of demographics on the Democratic side at the expense of Black folks. And what it's done is made Black men vulnerable. So a lot of brothers, not a lot, because we got to put it into context. Black women vote Democrat 98, 96% of the time, and Black men vote like 90% of the time. But in a
Mhm.
close election, if you can move that 2% or even more in particular states, if you're talking about the
Mhm.
president election, you can flip it. Now, I've seen people wring their hands and they're all mad, like, why are these brothers in the barbershop saying they're going for Trump? And I got to remind people, well, you have a brown community where 30% are going for Trump. You have women who have voted in the majority for Trump. You have Asians that have a 60-40 split for Trump, right? So there are these other demographics. And then my question to folks, instead of, pointing a finger at brothers in a barbershop who feel like they've been left out and have been very clear as to why they feel left out, how about these other groups that you've been pandering to? How are they going to make up the difference? So if there's an LGBT community who you said, we're going to fight, and you've been out there fighting on their behalf, and they can look and see the writing on the wall and say, wow, there's, legislation in 25 states. How will they make up the difference? How will they
Mhm.
increase their numbers? Would we get them as a demographic? I'm just using one group to be 90%, like Black folks
Mhm.
have. Let's go to our brown folks, right? Why 30%, going for Trump when he's talking all kind of crazy stuff that you can find racist, building walls, the whole nine. I'm going to exclude Florida and conservative Cubans for a minute. I'm just going to go
Yeah.
to, this large population. So why, if the Democrats are going for that group of people, which they are, how have you got them to move the needle? So maybe it's 75, 25%, right? You know, if you haven't done anything, I'm going to ask why not. Let's go to women because that's been the proverbial um, holy grail. Can we get the soccer mom, the white soccer mom, to come to Jesus and vote with us? And she's been always elusive. She
Mhm.
has not come to the table from the days that Clinton was trying to get her, to the days that Al Gore was trying to get her, to the days that John Kerry was trying to get her, to the days that Barack Obama was trying to get her, right? And so a lot of money and a lot of investment and a lot of framing of issues have been done for her comfort. And she hasn't come
Mhm.
to the table to the numbers that you would think. And so you got all these anti-abortion laws up and all these craziness. So will they, as women, move the needle and go from being 54% white women voting for, Trump to maybe 48% voting for him, right? I haven't seen that, and so we can go down the list and go to every demographic and ask, since you've been pandering to them and you've been courting them, how have they returned the favor? You got legislation for some, you're giving money to others, you've done a dance here and there. Okay, how have they repaid? Have they moved their numbers? Are they out there on, doing radical and very impactful get out to vote stuff? These are things that we got to ask and hold accountable versus going, why some brothers in the barbershop talking about going for Trump?
Yeah.
There should be enough people in the tent to be like, if they want to do that, that's okay. They've held it down for years and still do it 90%.
Yeah.
Still do. Remember, it's still 90% of us is still voting. What about the rest of y'all? And if you're not framing it that way, then I'm saying that either you have an anti-black bias or you're too afraid to face the music and go after the folks.
Or you need a scapegoat when Trump possibly wins again. And like, oh, it's the brothers. So kind of answering the question, do you feel hopeful?
It's state by state. So, it's state by state. South Carolina is 37% black. Can they carry the day? Do we get the full representation of black folks who, who want to vote a certain way? I mean, we can go state by state. Oftentimes we go.
South Carolina is always South Carolina is a weird place. I'm in Columbia, and Columbia is our capital, and we're theoretically a blue city in a red state, So a lot of times when there's like a national attention, like a lot of people kind of ignore South Carolina. This is why it's interesting for South Carolina to be the primary state for the Dems, and I think that's a smart move. We get ignored at times, and we feel as if, its place is going to be red anyway. And I have hope that narrative can change the same way that Georgia changed to deliberate the Biden.
But see, this is where you don't have the investments made. You see what I'm saying? If you're looking at that map, you go, okay, you got a large black population. You also have a large young population. What's been the investment? What's been the conversation? What's the relationship? How have you engaged them, right? And people go, well, we can spend our time in a battleground state. So you go to a battleground state. Which battleground state? Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and then we got to see, well, what's the return on the investment? So, in Pennsylvania, you get your 90% from us. So how have the other folks that you've been pandering to, how have they boosted the numbers so that it doesn't even become a battleground state? It's like, man, we got this on lock, right? Oftentimes these things are battleground states because you have underperformances percentage-wise with particular demographics that the Democrats are courting. And then you got to ask, how did you court them, right? Some things take time and money. So I know a little bit about that. So I'll give you an example in Texas. When we did some work, we understood based upon, this class that we kind of commissioned to do some studies for us. And they understood that black folks wanted to see themselves reflected in the conversation. So what that meant was, which black folks are you talking about? So maybe older black folks at the time wanted to see Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, leaders like that. But a younger demographic maybe wanted to see Bun B or Trade of Truth or, or maybe Scarface or somebody like that. They or somebody who had dreadlocks and was wearing a grill, right?
Yeah.
Who could speak to them. And so when we did our work, we put those type of individuals in commercials, right? And it worked. Now, when we came back and it's like, how do you win over its large brown population? The conventional speaking was like, well, just speak Spanish. So we find somebody who can go on TV and speak Spanish, and that would be a big miss. And it would also be an indication that you don't understand that demographic. what we come to understand is that you got to go door to door.
Yeah.
Hey, Mr. Gonzalez. Hey, Mr. Cruz. Hey, Mr. Jimenez. Can we come in? And it's not an overnight thing. You got to break bread. You got to sit down and have coffee, eat a taco, and you got to have these conversations. And you got to understand the nuances that some people are very religious, and they have, so they have that going on. Some people are trying to, kind of prove themselves not being second-class citizens, so they'll go hard in the paint in another way. A lot of people are military, so it takes time, and you don't want to invest in that. You see what I'm saying? You just figured, man, the Democrats sent a Puerto Rican organization to Texas to try and win over votes. And I'm like, there's not Puerto Ricans in Texas. Why would you do that when you have, first of all, you have on the ground and a lot of, Mexican folks, Tejanos in particular, right? There's a whole history there. Why would you do that? That's like missing the boat. That's like me sending, somebody from, I don't know, Arizona to come to South Carolina to try and get you all to understand what it's like being in the South. No, dude.
Yeah.
It's South Carolina. It's not South Phoenix. Two different places. You can say it's the South, but it's two very different cultures.
Absolutely. Well, I got about 5 minutes left. Every time I talk to you, I always ask if you have a story about somebody from your past. So I would say, do you have out of your dealings with Tupac, do you have any Tupac stories that you can give our listeners and viewers?
I have a lot of stories about Pac. The funniest story that I remember was him and Money B used to have a battle all the time. And the way the battle would be is that they would play the dozens on each other's moms.
Yeah.
And you never knew when it was going to come up, right?
Yeah.
And so, like I might be at a concert or something and Money B would be signing off and he's like, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. And we want to give a big shout out to Tupac's mom for working security tonight at this concert. If you see her, give her a tip. She's the woman with the beard, right? And it would be like, oh, snap. And then they drop the mic and then, move on. And then like 2 days later, like I did an interview with Pac, right? And Pac is, he's having a very serious conversation. He's talking about this, that. Like, man, if I get money, I want to open up a boys club and this, that, and the other. And then he goes, then he leans in and he goes, the one thing, Dave, I went to the Scared Straight program, and that's what got me set right. I go, no, I didn't know that. Yeah, man, I had to go to San Quentin, and Money B's mom was one of the inmates, and she got at us, and she told us, you better want to come in here because I'll be here. And he went down this whole thing, and he said it's so serious, and so now I have this thing on tape with him talking about Money B's mom. And then like 2 weeks later, Money B is like on the air on WBLS in New York. And he's like, man, I just want to say Tupac's mom really got busy on the drum machine. She's the one that programmed our album. So I just remember their friendship and the fact that you never knew when they were going to talk about each other's moms. And of course they loved each other. They loved their moms, but that was their running joke. And that always made me smile that you just never knew when the mother joke would just come from Money B or Pac.
Oh man, I fucking love it. Yo, well, that concludes this episode of the Worthy Cause podcast on the Arena Network. Thank you to my guest, Davey D, who's a hip hop historian, political activist, and Pac historian as well. Anything West Coast hip hop related, this man knows his stuff. Thank you so much for spending the time for this. Really appreciate it. I need to come back out there soon.
Yes, sir.
And catch you. Shout out to my homie Doug Infinite that's out there. And yeah, are you still playing at that spot that we was at a month or 2 years ago? Is that spot still going on?
Oh, you're talking about old Can. So Torrance or Max Champ and that whole crew, they usually DJ in San Francisco. So you have the right hat on. In fact, next week we're doing a big party for the Giants, right?
Yeah.
So they're at a place called Victory Hall, right?
Okay.
On 330 Rich, if you're ever in the city, and they get busy, and that's where the crew is at. And And me, I'm at a place in the East Bay at the Miranda, and and sometimes I'm down there with them. So we still spin, and they still spin vinyl. I'm not doing the vinyl thing no more. So
Yeah. Well, I feel you. Well, look, yeah, because you talked to me about getting rid of your records. That's a whole other conversation we need to have soon. Um, Anyways, thank you for having me. I'm probably be in your neck of the woods in August around my birthday. We'll have to catch up.
okay,
And yo, you know what I'm saying? This is Priest Jacobs, aka Ice T.
yeah, we still play your drops. We play your drops like every other day.
Yeah, shout out to Ice T.
People are like, man, how'd you get Ice T on your show? Yeah, it's like, man, Ice T is funny.
Man.
I need to let Ice T hear you do his thing.
Please do that and tell him I love him. I don't want him to get mad at me. But anyways, yo, it's the Worthy Cause podcast, Arena Network, Davey D. Thank y'all so much. Peace.